So everything within the first 10 years was identified to have focus on downtown. And it was after the kind of the 11 to 50 years, which is still a long time period, that it started to shift and look at those districts outside of the downtown core. So we are now into that 11 to 50 year time period. So it's really, we're starting to have that conversation around how do we plan and support those other neighborhoods, which, aligns with Kelty's description of coming to the city, and really it fits in with the heart of our city master plan in terms of those implementation timelines. So back when this was first put in place, there were 3 immediate terms or actions that were put into place. One was establishing a downtown business unit manager as a single point of contact. We're lucky enough that George is on the call, and George filled that position for a number of years and really did a great job at setting this whole thing up for success. We had a structure of a community representative body as a sounding board, which took shape as the heart of our city committee. And then there was a third action around expanding and supporting the downtown BRZ as a unified voice for the downtown. So for the last 12 years, those 3 bodies, again, the heart of our city committee, the city of Lethbridge, and the downtown BRZ, have worked in a collaborative partnership to advance the goals of downtown. And in 2020, it was recognized that just over a decade into this, it was prudent to reassess and evaluate where we were. So the 3 organizations collaborated on a governance review to understand how we were operating, roles and responsibilities, budgets, and performance. So I won't bore you with the details of that. But generally, the executive summary is that it was an extensive research and analysis, and that we were doing good work. But what we needed to do is to be very clear on our roles and responsibilities of those 3 different organizations. We needed to do stronger business planning collectively, and we needed to implement performance measurement criteria so that we could actually tell the story about how successful these initiatives were. All that again to say that we've accomplished a lot, but adjustments were needed to ensure progress going forward. There were 6 recommendations of that governance report, and I won't go through those right now. And then an implementation plan which broke out how those different recommendations would actually put into action. So you'll see in the list there's a few actions. We were to amend the heart of our city terms of reference, which we did last year in 2021. Council approved the terms of reference changes, and I'll go through a few of those details. We are in the process right now. I have it green as completed, but it'll actually be completed next Tuesday if council supports it. We've completed a new BRZ BIA bylaw to replace the existing one. And that's a really important piece, as we've developed it as a template framework or template format so that it can be utilized by the warehouse district in establishing themselves. And it would be basically a cut and paste exercise from the downtown BRZ, putting them on the same kind of footing and same understanding as the relationship between the city and the BIA. The third one in green there is exploring the better integration between the urban revitalization and our Lethbridge Land Department. And so that was one of the pieces that triggered the formation of Opportunity Lethbridge. If we look into the governance report, a lot of different recommendations drew attention to that we needed to better leverage land to realize our revitalization goals, which triggered that relationship. You'll see in the orange or the red there to develop a 4-year collaborative strategic plan between those 3 organizations. And I'm happy to say that those 3 organizations and the warehouse BIA executive forming committee, for lack of better words, will be doing a full day facilitated session on February 1st to begin that process of putting that strategic plan in place. And the major intent of that is to then inform the next 4-year operating budget in the hopes of getting those operational dollars that have been utilized in the downtown to be continued, but also to get operational dollars to help support the warehouse district. And the 4th one would be to develop, after that strategic plan, would be to develop a state of the downtown, for lack of a better words, but would be basically a report to establish metrics and report on them, understanding success. So I won't go through all the terms of reference changes, but the big one that really applies to the warehouse district is that we went through and changed all references that the Heart of Our City Committee represented downtown to being that the Heart of Our City represented the interests of the urban core, and the urban core being the kind of the name, for lack of better words, that represents that area represented in the map that I showed at the beginning. And this map right here. And so boundaries are complex. We set a bunch of different boundaries, and sometimes they overlap and sometimes they mean different things. So you'll see in the red outline, that's what we define as the downtown, both from the area redevelopment plan, but also from the downtown BRZ. And so it includes several districts that were identified in the Heart of Our City master plan. So again, since 2007, that really has been the focus. In 2018, we completed the Civic Common Master Plan, which provided the next level of planning for that civic district that's identified in the orange on the map. And in 2019 through 2022, we started to draw attention to those other areas. The Center Village and Upper East Side, or Warehouse District, as more commonly known here with this group, as well as my title shifting from downtown revitalization to urban revitalization as a precursor to all of this work coming into place. And then City Council also recently approved grants and incentives that expanded into these areas, previously being limited to downtown again. I'm gonna skip over that and just talk a little bit more about the Heart of Our City Committee and its relationship with BIAs. So business improvement areas are established formally under the Municipal Government Act. And we wanted to ensure some consistency with the Heart of Our City governance model. So we really wanted to create a format where you'll see on this Venn diagram, we have clear roles and responsibilities. Sometimes they overlap, but we each have a role and it's unique in many cases. You'll see that in this one here, it says XYZ BIA. And the reason why it says XYZ is because we see that as being the spot for any BIA in the community. So whether that be downtown BRZ, warehouse district, crossings on the west side, should they want to, maybe an industrial park BIA, there's no limitations. And we see all of those BIAs in the future having the same relationship with the city and the Heart of Our City Committee. So money where your mouth is. And this is really, I think, probably where I tie into some of Kelty's comments. The request for the city to provide funding for the warehouse district, I think is really important that it's connected to the fact that there's a BIA. A BIA represents a common voice for 500, 600 businesses, as opposed to city administration and the Heart of Our City Committee having to have conversations with 600 individual businesses. There's power in a voice and there's collective impact, and it's way easier to have a conversation with the Board of Representatives than it is to, again, to have all those individual conversations. I use the example that seems a little ridiculous, but I think it's a good example that if we're going to put flower planters out and put flowers in them every year, we would like to run it by 6 people on a board, what color those flowers are going to be, make a decision and plant them and get on with it. We don't want to be having conversation with 600 businesses as to what color of flowers or what type of flowers they should be and continually spinning our tires with something like that. So with the formation of a warehouse BIA, we're certainly prepared to take forward some recommendations in this upcoming operating budget to council to secure funding for the warehouse district area to advance some of their goals. So again, similar, building off of Kelty, why now? Why did we wait so long? It's lots of different things are coming together right now. We've expanded my role from downtown revitalization to be urban revitalization. Council's expanded the scopes of grants and incentives to include this district. I called it a slog of land use based issues. This is, drawing attention to some of the points that Kelty made on the, this is supervised consumption site and some different types of applications that have potentially gone to SDAB or in other levels of city council or municipal planning commission. We're aware of the social and economic pressures in the neighborhood over the last 5 to 10 years. We've recently completed this Heart of Our City governance report, which talked about that additional support for BIAs. We're seeing increasing in private investment in the area. There's been lots of changes, O2 Fitness being the latest one. but we're also poised for two major redevelopments in the area, with the 1200 block taking place between 12A and B streets. Maybe they're B and C, I can't remember, keep them straight, on 3rd Avenue, as well as the Town Square site, which is the former London Drugs Soundgarden, recently purchased by local investors and going to be going through major redevelopment over the next decade. So we want to be planned. We want to be approach this the right way. And again, having a BIA in place is certainly makes those conversations easier. We've also have a number of important CIP or capital projects coming through from the city. So we have the 3rd Avenue functional planning study, which was actually started at the beginning, on the front end of the pandemic. And based on feedback from the businesses along 3rd Avenue, our transportation department put that project on pause, but we do intend on bringing it back up shortly, trying to align that public engagement with that project with the Warehouse District Area Redevelopment Plan, which I'll go into some more detail on. We also have the Urban Core Public Realm Enhancement, which is just over $2 million in public realm enhancement capital dollars, which is really exciting. But we're not going to just go out and kind of spend it wherever we feel. We want it to be planned and coordinated. So that Warehouse District ARP is really important. So just talk about the ARP really quickly. So an area redevelopment plan is a really important statutory document. What it does is it establishes the regulatory framework for land use and other strategic growth. A statutory plan means that it is binding in that what it says is kind of the direction. So council approved $350,000 to undertake this plan. And we intend on starting that project shortly this year. And are hoping that it takes about 12 to 16 months. And we are really excited to get that moving. We're hoping to integrate with the new forming warehouse BIA for conversations. We've already had conversations with the developers of the 1200 block and the Town Square site so that they are integrated right into this planning process. And what we really want to do here is create the vision for the neighborhood. So the actual warehouse district, we haven't, this is not finalized. That's part of the public engagement process that we will go through, but generally this is how we describe it. So obviously Highway 3 on the north, Merrimagrath Drive on the east, Stafford Drive on the west. And the 3rd Avenue boundary is probably the one that is probably more subject to change, but it generally follows the commercial district boundary of the properties on the south side of 3rd Avenue. So again, the district was identified in the Heart of our City master plan. It provides some direction as to what that might look like. It provides some images of that could come into play. It describes it a little bit as a district where there would be public and private investment and redevelopment to create a walkable area with increased densities and a mix of uses. So we have this in the Heart of our City master plan as a starting point, but again, through that warehouse district ARP process, we would be engaging with all the folks in the warehouse district and the broader community to understand whether this is still relevant, what's changed since this plan was put in place in 2007, and really narrowing in on what the vision for this neighborhood would be, how it's different from the downtown beers or downtown district, and what are maybe some of the similarities as well. I won't go into that. So I'll talk a little bit about the Urban Core Public Realm. So this is really some capital project funding to do replacement, upgrading, or renewal of our public realm, which is basically the space that's between property lines. This could be the replacement of obsolete street furniture. It could be the filling in or topping up of gaps in our infrastructure, or it could be leveraged as an incentive towards private and public development. So
they can see a light at the end of the tunnel, with Johnny Reed set to start touring in March. It will be Sacramento's.
Thank you. And so council approved $2 million for this fund this past year. in the last CIP, but it was bound to downtown. So we undertook a number of projects in the downtown, from parklets to street banners to replacement of flower planters, as well as leveraging dollars against the post office redevelopment to contribute to new sidewalks and street lights in front. This is similar to how we plan on implementing it, but under the new the urban core boundaries. We do intend that once we have the redevelopment plan in place and what we should do for improvements, we do have capital funding to then turn those improvements into reality. So that was a really quick overview of where we're going. We're really excited about the involvement in the warehouse district. So if you have questions on any of that, I'd be happy to talk about that. And Lorianne, if you want me to pause before I talk about something like plaques, I can, and then we can pick that up.
Thank you, Andrew. That was lovely. We as a community have done a really, I feel, a really good job of blending the new developments with the historic buildings and revitalizing historic buildings into things like Pure Spa and Miro Bistro and the Oliver building. There's so many examples in the downtown, in the original downtown, of how well Lethbridge's buildings and history have been presented and preserved. And that is, we have another opportunity to do that in the warehouse district. We're all very excited about the 1200 block and the new developments that are going to go in and all of the upgrades and all of that. But I know that our LHS focus is and primary concern and question is going to be, how do we continue the blend from the original downtown core through the warehouse district? There are a lot of buildings there that are already being reused. The IDEA building, the motor car supply building, there's so many right along that one corridor, and I'm sure that there's more that Belinda could speak to as well. But I know that we as the LHS members are very much looking for that ability and that blending of preserving our historic buildings, and I think that's a really good way to sort of seg into talking about the plaques and how we can work within this redevelopment plan to make sure that the warehouse district ends up being just as beautifully done as the downtown.
Yeah, so kind of how, at least I'll touch on how it's worked in the downtown and how we potentially could support warehouse district in the same manner. Doesn't necessarily need to be the same, but in the downtown, within the heart of our city, kind of a budget, there is just under $10,000 annually directly allocated to plaques. So over the last decade, the Lethbridge Historic Society has taken on the role of a lot of the authoring of the content of the plaques and working with the Historical Places Advisory Committee to identify which properties they should go on. Any plaque in the downtown core has been paid for by the Heart of Our City Committee. And so within these expanded roles and responsibilities, that would be something that could be easily replicated in the warehouse district. I think that would be something that Lorianne, as your individual on the Heart of Our City Committee, could eventually bring forward with this proposal. And it could be a good, nice partnership between the Historic Places Advisory Committee, the Lethbridge Historic Society, and Heart of Our City, really just identifying the priority buildings, creating the content, and pushing those through and paying for the plaques, and then working on getting them installed. So, picking away at 3 or 4 a year is probably how that would work out. In the course of time, we start to build enough content that you start to see historic walks, like Jane's walks and those types of things take place, capturing and leveraging that really exciting material that's now publicly accessible.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'd like to open up for questions from all of the guests. So if anyone has any anything they'd like to comment or questions they'd like to ask, either to Kelty or myself or to Andrew, please feel free. I am watching for hands. So if anyone has any questions or comments or anything like that, please feel free. We would love to have some feedback from you guys. George.
Thank you. Great presentation, Andrew and Kelty. Good to see you guys. Very exciting plans that are coming along. I'm really happy to see that. Lots of potential, obviously, in the warehouse district. There's some great old brick buildings there, and I can certainly see how plaques and that kind of thing would further enhance, attracting people to that area just to see what's there, and then start to realize, the planning that's underway for that area, and the improvements to the public realm, and I presume some underground infrastructure and that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, good stuff.
Thank you, George. I know your ears probably perked up when you heard the mention of the Historic Places Advisory Committee. So I'm assuming we'll have fun working together on the new plaques.
Yes, we've got kind of a dearth in that department right now. There's nothing in the wings right now, so it's a good time to hit us up for something like that.
Well, there we go. I guess we know what we're doing for the next couple of months, right? Kelty, is there anything that you wanted to add to Andrew's presentation, or just to the conversation in general? This is your district, after all, basically.
I just wanted to say that I was super excited to see Andrew show some graphics from the design elements of the possibilities for the warehouse district. That kind of infrastructure, the walkability, the street trees, that kind of thing. We have 5 street trees in the whole warehouse district. 4 of them are in front of the mill, and 1 of them is over by the motor car supply building. It used to be a heavily treed neighborhood, so we are missing trees, and as a result, with all the concrete structures that were built in the 60s, kind of through modern day, it's a heat trap in there. So as someone who's in the warehouse district every day, it might be 35 degrees in the city, it's almost 42 degrees in the warehouse district. So we're really looking forward to some cover. But that's
good for a cold beer, maybe.
Yeah, if someone had some. So that kind of development, to me personally, is really exciting. Now, I know that in talking with some of our businesses, there is some concern about removing car access to 3rd Avenue because it is a 4-lane road. But that gives us a lot of space. And if you look at the sidewalks along 3rd Avenue as well, there's a lot of space to play with. And I would even make the argument that if we can't get business owners to okay bike lanes and more pedestrian infrastructure and street trees on 3rd Avenue, come over to 2nd Avenue, because I bet I can convince everyone on my avenue to do it, and also it benefits me. So I'm gonna advocate for that right away. But we're really excited about that kind of thing. We're also really excited about the connection that will be into the downtown. So there's kind of like a hard cutoff on Stafford, when you switch districts. Yeah. So you go from really beautiful revitalization around Casa, and then 2 blocks over, you're into hard concrete and cracked sidewalks and, that kind of thing. So we're really excited. We're seeing a lot more businesses come in as well, and businesses refacing their buildings to update them. So we've seen a lot of updates in the last even couple of months. So that's really exciting as well. So the neighborhood's turning over and it's getting a lot younger and newer. It's going to be a great time. And I can't wait to put some plaques on some historic things.
Where would you start? If
I believe
which buildings?
I believe the motor car supply actually already has one. But that's a bit different. I think it has to do with Chinatown stuff. And then the Idea building and the John Deere building, where Purely Inspired is. Those buildings are kind of iconic.
They are.
Might be worth looking at to see if we can still spot the original structure of the mill as well. And like that mill has been a cornerstone of that district since basically it was founded. So it would be interesting to dig up some history on the mill as well.
I feel like there was a conversation at some point early last year with Belinda about the oldest house in Lethbridge is in that area, or am I misremembering that?
There is an old house.
You're misremembering. There is a house there. It's not the oldest in Lethbridge, but there is still one house left.
One house, yeah.
It's painted blue, but it is still there. Not used as a house, but there's one house standing.
Yeah, it's if you look between the blue building, which is now office supplies, in the corner of, I think it's 10th Street and 2nd Avenue. It used to be like Napa Auto Parts or something.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
the bank, there is a tiny little house tucked in there. It's like the size of a modern shed. So yeah, there is one house left in the district.
It reminds me of that very small little white house that's tucked down somewhere between 5th and 6th Avenue, I think it is. Down by the RBC type of thing. And there's this one tiny little house amongst all of this business.
The clearing house. You have
George?
Wendy, yeah, Wendy had her hand up first.
Oh, Wendy, sorry. Wendy, that hand blends in with your background and I couldn't tell.
Well, there you go. I'll need to get a different, I'll do some of this. I'm curious to know, in the warehouse district, what is the vacancy rate, or how many empty buildings are there in that? So what is the potential for a lot more businesses going in? Are those buildings usable?
Great question. Andrew, do you have up-to-date statistics?
No, we definitely don't. And that's a value of the area redevelopment plan process, is that typically when you undertake a master plan or an area redevelopment plan, you undertake a lot of effort to understand the neighborhood from a business and a built form, you know, everything from a street tree count to a vacancy count of buildings. We would really get a good understanding of the current conditions, and then that would set the kind of the base work for trying to make improvements. Just from my knowledge of the neighborhood is that there are vacancies, but we are seeing a lot of investment, a lot of properties being turned over. Some have already been renovated. There's others that have been purchased and are just, you know, getting their ducks in a row before they make renovations. There is I think probably if we were looking at property transactions, the warehouse district is probably one of the hottest areas in town. And the incentives are flying off the shelves. We got approved additional funding from council in November of 2020 and had indicated to council that we thought it would get us 2 years. We're just over a year and we're almost out of funds. We'll be providing a council update in March on the status of those grants. And then similarly, you know, going into the next operating budget, testing the waters to see if there's an appetite for more funding for grants and incentives to stimulate that reinvestment in buildings.
I do have one other comment.
Oh, sorry.
I'd like to support Kelty's suggestion that 2nd Avenue would be a much better route for a bike path. I drive 2nd and 3rd quite a bit. 3rd Avenue is busy and it carries a lot of traffic. It feeds a lot of businesses. 2nd Avenue is a much more relaxed, still a nice wide street with some parking, but the parking is even further off the main 2 lanes, I think. So to me, it's a really good alternative to 3rd Avenue for bikes. Good connections at either end of the avenue as well.
Yeah, the 3rd Avenue functional planning project for a variety of different ways hit some snags. And COVID was the biggest reason behind that. And businesses were just not in the right state of mind to be having public engagement or trying to complete surveys and understand how these changes would happen in front of their business while they're just trying to pay the next utility bill. So a lot of that made us pause. But at the same time, I think another big contributing factor was we were asking businesses to comment on how the lifeline to their business, being 3rd Avenue, and the pedestrian and the vehicular traffic that goes along there could be changed without a vision for the neighborhood. So that's one piece that we're going to be trying and having conversations with administration is probably trying to get the warehouse district advancing first, get a vision for the neighborhood, and then start the engagement on the 3rd Avenue project, because it's really hard to comment on a vision of a street if you don't know the vision of the area that that street is running through. So administration, we've taken that back. We're trying to rethink and be a little bit more strategic. And I would suggest that you can expect to see some aligned engagement between the warehouse ARP and that 3rd Avenue project. And in many ways, it might come across as one project going forward. In terms of, especially leveraging businesses' time. We know that's valuable. And so if we can get comments from those businesses on both projects at the same time, we can likely move things along in a much more streamlined and effective fashion.
Yeah. Wendy, just to follow up with you for like vacancy rate in the neighborhood. I don't have actual statistics, but I can tell you that there's over 400 addresses in the neighborhood right now. I would say just by looking around, our vacancy rate has definitely dropped. So at the start of COVID, we actually had a higher vacancy rate than we do now. And that's because I think during COVID, a lot of people either lost employment, decided to open their own businesses, or relocated their businesses based on square footage rate. Our general square footage rate in the warehouse district is significantly lower than, say, like downtown or even the west side. So a lot of small businesses are finding a way to start up in our neighborhood and take over square footage really quickly. So like things aren't sitting empty in our neighborhood right now, which is prime. That's what we want to see.
To a good
Yeah, I've noticed.
foundation to build from, doesn't it? A growing interest.
Yeah.
Good show.
Yeah.
Belinda, is
I-
it related or?
It's related to the whole presentation. Do you realize neither of you, and I know you're talking to a group who might know this, but neither of you explained why it's called the warehouse district?
Well, because you're the expert.
It's not my presentation.
No, that's fair.
Do you want to?
I actually don't know. Everything that I would have called it Upper East Side, but the neighborhood kind of claimed the warehouse district. And so from the city's perspective, we're not gonna tell you who you are.
Belinda can correct any of my history on this, but the warehouse district is actually the original name for that area because it is the original space where all the warehouses were housed. There's actually a spur line that comes off the railway that goes right down my back alley, or it used to, it doesn't exist anymore. So every business between 1st Avenue and 2nd Avenue, right up till Stafford, had basically a spur line, the rail line. So they would just push rail cars down the alley to get the businesses get the loads where they needed to go. So this was kind of the original industrial and warehouse area of the city. And then sometime in the early 2000s, I think around the time the Heart of Our City master plan was developed, some consultant from Calgary changed it to the Upper East Side for no reason. That's as far as I know. Belinda, is that correct?
Yeah, it wasn't the original. The original is actually, the original warehouse district is that district that's actually west of 5th Street. That was the original. When that built up in 1909-ish, this became the warehouse district, and it was wholesalers throughout. And yeah, they were promoting the warehouse district from 1909 on, and it was the name until, you're right, the city picked a weird name and just threw it on that area.
Just arbitrarily changed it to the Upper East Side, where it is neither upper nor east side of very much.
I think it sounds somewhat snooty New York. So maybe that's what they were going for in an effort to try and give it a reputation that it didn't have. But
I definitely
studied Toronto. The consultants were actually from Toronto.
oh, well, that explains it. Yeah. George, go ahead with your question. You've been waiting a while.
I'm glad Belinda raised that one question, because I was going to make make a statement and then ask a question about something different. I was wondering if in the translation of what's been happening and what will happen in that area. If a larger type of history type of sign as opposed to a plaque might be applicable in an appropriate open space that does describe kind of the story that we've just been talking about, what the origin of the area was and how it's gone through a number of transitions over the years. Like, it was a completely different district when Highway 3 was on 3rd Avenue as well. So there's lots of changes that came about as a result of the highway being there, and then with the highway being relocated and that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of stories that can certainly be told that will help people understand what has transpired in say almost a century of development and redevelopment in that area. The question I had is for Andrew in terms of future land use and that kind of thing. Is residential one and mixed use, I presume, would be some of the considerations that will be looked at in the area. There's a lot of space, and I think when it was called the Upper East Side, some of the original plans looked at some potential residential development in there and whatnot.
Yeah, the description of the area, again, the Upper East Side in the Heart of our City Master Plan does speak about higher densities and that kind of walkable mixed use environment. And so, going into the public engagement, if everyone says no, they don't want that, which I can't foresee, but we're going to leave a lot of that up to the engagement piece. But I would suggest that there is exponentially more potential as it relates to residential mixed use in the warehouse district than there is in the downtown. The downtown has many small 25-foot lots that are split up and obviously have lots of historic buildings that occupy those small lots. So to get the kind of the scale of site you need to support kind of those larger densities of residential requires quite an effort in consolidation. Whereas the warehouse district naturally has bigger lots because of the warehouse nature of the area. So we're already seeing with the 1200 block and with the future of the town square that those are going to be adding hundreds of residential units into the area, which obviously directly would contribute to vibrancy and retail success and those types of things. So I don't want to go too far without doing that public engagement and the right processes, but I find it hard to think of that area without significantly more residential growth. And I think the land and the way that it's split up already, let alone without consolidations, is going to lend itself to that growth. And if you haven't, on social media, you can follow the 1200 block project. Their development permit has been approved. We are collaborating with them on a cost sharing agreement to do public realm design. So we will be, the city and the private developer will be collaborating on redoing all the sidewalks, the street trees, and the street lights surrounding that block. So that'll be how we're leveraging that public realm enhancement dollars with private development to advance a common goal for that area. So it's going to be a lot of work, but there'll be some public engagement components of that as well.
That is exciting.
That is exactly what I was doing, actually. It was looking them up on Instagram. Yeah, it's, I would agree that the warehouse district has more space for mixed use and residential development. The downtown does tend to, although the condos are beautiful in the upper floors of the buildings, not all of them are very spacious. And we're trying to encourage residential in these new areas or in the redeveloped areas and encourage an increasing residency in the downtown and the warehouse district as well. The only way that you get a vibrant community is with retail and industrial and office and residential and all of those things coming together to make that community the exciting place that it's going to be. And Kelty, you look like you're just about to explode with excitement.
I have been waiting for news on the 1200 block for months because that project sits kitty corner to my business, and it would be so exciting because it's a plot right now to have mixed use commercial and residential. Let's fill that space with people who are going to be economic drivers in our community. That is so amazing. I am so ecstatic. Thank you for that news tonight.
And for this group's interest, I believe that all, if not majority, of the original Elks building will be maintained and leveraged in the development. I don't believe there will be any sort of substantial demolition of that. And we've thrown around some ideas of maybe getting Lanny McDonald down for the ribbon cutting, since he was playing in the game when the arena burnt down on the site. So there's some history for the group.
That sounds like fun. If you are interested and you're looking for some more information about the warehouse district, I and Belinda and everybody would like to remind you that we did do a walking tour of the warehouse district, and it is up on the Historic Society LHS YouTube channel. So we have one now, and I feel like in 10 years it's going to be the before and the after walking tours, and to be able to compare the two side by side is it's going to be fantastic. I'm very much looking forward to it, and it's basically a historian's dream, right? To see an area before and then after, and to go back and be able to look at the growth of this area all throughout its history. So thank you for reminding me of that, Belinda. And I'm sure that as this area develops and more happens and things are planned and built, and we will do more tours, and perhaps we can, and I don't want to guarantee or speak out of turn, but the idea of doing a warehouse district beer and history tour is not all that far-fetched. And perhaps it can be sort of the walking down Second Avenue. Wendy, I think you're right that Second Avenue is very very easily developed into that walking avenue with the boulevards and the trees and the benches and that sort of thing. So if anyone has any other comments or questions, I'm just going to say thank you very much to Andrew and to Kelty for joining us and for presenting on the future of the warehouse district. I know that when it comes time, we will be working on the historic plaques on the buildings. George, I'm sure you'll be involved in that. And I love the idea of almost like a central plaza that has a more detailed explanation and history of the area. One of Andrew's graphics was like a central almost plaza park area, and it was rimmed by hedges and bushes and things like that, and something like that with a visual history of the area would be a fun project to work on, and I think it's going to be beautiful. And yeah, so thank you guys very much for joining us. Does anyone have any other? George, go ahead.
Sorry, that was just my clapping.
Oh, yay. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so if anyone has any other comments, I will go ahead and take those now. Otherwise, I am going to say good night to everyone, and very much looking forward to working in this district over the next little while. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining us. I very much appreciate it. Belinda, unless you have anything else to add, I am going to say good night.
I think that's it. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks again.